So I've been holding on to this for a long time, and I figured this might be the right place to finally get it off my chest. It's the story of how my boyfriend Jake and I, along with our friends Ben and Laura, decided to go hiking in the Osceola National Forest in northeastern Florida. We thought it would be a relaxing week, just disconnecting from work and getting some fresh air, but it ended up being the most terrifying experience of my life. Even now, I feel sick just thinking back on it. Everything started off great. We left early on a Friday morning, excited to hit the trail. The weather couldn't have been better. Bright skies, warm but not sweltering. The woods were beautiful, tall trees all around, birds chirping nonstop. At one point, we even saw a deer standing close by, watching us without moving. Ben tried to snap a photo, but it darted off before he could. We stuck to a simple trail, nothing too rough, just something easygoing. We snapped tons of pictures, had some snacks, and by late afternoon, we were ready to pick a spot to set up camp. That's when we came across this area that looked like an old campsite or maybe what used to be a small RV park. It was kind of worn out, like no one had used it in years. There was an open space, a few old fire pits halfway covered in weeds. To be honest, it seemed perfect. We felt a little like explorers finding some forgotten place. We thought, yeah, this is the spot. So we set up our tents, Jake and I in one, Ben and Laura in the other. We gathered up some branches for a fire and settled in. That first night was actually great. We got the fire going, and the smell of the smoke mixed with the fresh pine air felt really cozy. We had a few beers, nothing crazy, just enough to chill out. Laura and I connected my portable speaker to my phone and played some songs. We even danced around the fire a bit, probably looking ridiculous, but we didn't care. It was one of those nights where everything feels right, like the outside world doesn't exist. We stayed up late, laughing and sharing stories until we got tired and crawled into our tents. I fell asleep right away, warm beside Jake, thinking this was going to be one of the best weekends ever. But then everything flipped. I don't know exactly what time it was, but I woke up suddenly. I could smell smoke, not a little asterisk a lot star. My eyes flew open. I peeked through the tent opening and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Flames everywhere. It looked like the forest itself was burning. This wasn't a small fire from the pit. It was a massive wall of fire, raging red and orange, roaring so loud it felt like the ground was shaking. My chest started pounding. I screamed and shook Jake awake, yelling that there was a fire. He shot up, saw it, and I could see the panic hit his face. The heat was already pressing into our tent, smoke stung our eyes, and we knew we had to move right then. We rushed out, barefoot, barely thinking, and bolted to Ben and Laura's tent. I yelled their names, hitting the side of the tent, while Jake shouted that we had to run. They came stumbling out, looking confused, but once they saw the flames, they freaked out too. The fire was surrounding us on 3 sides, closing in fast. The only open direction was a patch of forest behind the camp that hadn't caught fire yet. I grabbed my phone and wallet, Jake grabbed his flashlight, and Ben and Laura grabbed just a few things too. We had to leave everything else, our backpacks, food, even the tents. We ran like our lives depended on it, because they did. We tore into the woods, tripping over tree roots and branches, Jake's flashlight bouncing all over the place, barely showing the way. The smoke was thick, my lungs burned, and I could hear Laura coughing behind me. Ben shouted for us to keep going. Behind us, the orange glow chased us through the trees, getting closer. I was shaking. My legs felt like jelly, but I couldn't stop. All I could think was, asterisk, we have to get out. We can't stop now. Asterisk, it was total panic. My arms were getting scratched by branches, and my bare feet were getting torn up on rocks and sticks, but I didn't care. I just kept moving. Every time I looked back, I swore the fire was almost right behind us, like something out of a nightmare. My mind was spinning. How had this happened? Did our little fire get out of control? Was someone else camping nearby? But we didn't have time to figure it out. We were just running blind, hoping we'd hit a road or anything that could get us away from it. And that's when it got even worse. Out of nowhere, there were people blocking the path ahead. I didn't even see them until they were right in front of us. They were wearing what looked like homemade cloth masks, with strange designs painted around the eyes. Some had bats, others had belts, and I'm sure one guy had a chain. I remember the sound it made when it swung. There were maybe 6 of them, and they rushed at us so fast we didn't even have a chance to react. Before I could even scream, one grabbed my hair and yanked me to the ground. The pain in my ribs came a second later when he slammed a bat into my side. I screamed, curling up, but he kicked me again. I could hear Jake shouting, and then a loud grunt. He'd been hit with the chain and dropped to his knees. Ben tried to cover Laura, but he got hit hard too, and Laura was crying, trying to pull him back up. They just kept hitting us. But it wasn't only the beating, it was what they said while doing it. Horrible things. I still can't bring myself to say the exact words, but it was disgusting. They were shouting about how we were going to die and what they'd do to us first. It was like they were feeding off our fear. Every strike felt worse than the last. My arm throbbed, my legs were bleeding, and I was sobbing, thinking this is how it ends. We were going to die in those woods, with a fire burning behind us and these masked freaks laughing while they tore us apart. And then I realized something. It had to be them. They probably set the fire to trap us. It was all a setup. I don't know how long it went on. It felt like forever, but it was probably just a few minutes. We kept trying to break free, dodging between trees, even while they chased us and laughed like it was a game. Jake managed to grab my arm at one point and dragged me to my feet, and we ran again. Ben and Laura were behind us. I could hear their crying, their footfalls, and then, just like that, those maniacs stopped chasing us. They started yelling something, but I didn't look back. I don't know why they stopped. Maybe they got bored. Maybe something scared them off. Maybe there was something even worse out there. A bear? Another group? I don't know. We didn't wait to find out. We kept going, running until we couldn't hear them anymore, until the trees started to thin out. Eventually, we stumbled out of the forest onto a small road near a nearby town. I don't even remember how we got there, just that we were suddenly standing on pavement, panting, bleeding, a mess. We looked awful. Clothes ripped, bruises, scratches everywhere, shaking like leaves. We found a local sheriff's office and ran inside. The officer at the desk looked stunned. He gave us water and listened while we tried to explain. My voice barely working, Jake doing most of the talking, all of us trembling. We told him about the fire, the attackers, everything. He wrote it down and said he'd send someone out there to investigate. We were taken to the hospital, and later the officers went to check the place we described. Everything was burned, our gear, the trees around the camp. There was no trace of those masked attackers, and it didn't seem like any local troublemakers either. The sheriff didn't know what to make of it. Even now, I can barely believe it really happened. We just wanted a weekend out in nature, and it turned into something I still haven't fully processed. I keep seeing those faces in my dreams, hearing their words, feeling the pain again. Jake has nightmares too. Laura told me Ben barely speaks about it. We're all messed up in different ways. And the one thing we all wonder, the thing that still haunts us, is what could have scared those people enough to make them stop. What made them give up the chase? So yeah, I needed to tell this. And if you're someone who enjoys the outdoors, camping, hiking, please be careful. Let someone know where you're going. Stick to places that aren't so remote. And don't ever camp at a place that feels off or abandoned. I don't know if those people were ever caught, or if the fire's origin was ever figured out. I honestly don't care anymore. I just want others to stay safe, because that was the worst night of my life, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. This happened only a couple weeks ago while I was out on a backpacking trip, my first one of the season. As far as I knew, it was going to be a normal trek along a trail in eastern Montana. The route was a 2-day hike in, and then the same 2 days to return the same path. I'd done lots of similar backpacking trips before, so I figured this one would be no different. I left my car at the vacant trailhead and began the hike. The first few hours went smoothly. The path was calm and quiet, and I felt like I was keeping a good pace. I had about 3 miles left until I'd hit the first campground. Though I wasn't stopping there for the night, I planned to keep going 2 more miles past that to a second site where I'd actually stay. I started feeling a bit hungry and found a decent spot off to the side of the trail, leaning against a tree to rest. I pulled out a small snack, just planning to eat quick and then keep moving. While sitting there, I happened to glance up and saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a man standing among the trees on the opposite side of the path, just staring straight at me. He wasn't walking. He didn't seem like he was doing anything at all, just standing still and watching. I couldn't tell how long he'd been there. As soon as our eyes met, he raised his hand and gave this strange wave. It looked like he meant it to come off as friendly, but it felt totally off. The wave was stiff and almost mechanical, and the way he just stood out there staring made the whole thing feel incredibly weird. I got up and continued on the trail. He hadn't done anything directly threatening, but it still felt wrong. I had no idea why he was off the trail or what he was even doing out there. I just wanted to get distance between us. The next 3 miles turned out to be harder than I'd expected. It took me almost 2 hours to make it to the first camp area. Like I said, this was just a rest stop for me. I wasn't planning to sleep there. But since my earlier break had been cut short, I figured I'd use this chance to make a hot meal and rest longer before heading to my planned campsite for the night. I dropped my pack and pulled out my little propane burner to heat up water and fix one of my freeze-dried meals. Once I got the water boiling and poured it in, I just sat and waited for it to finish cooking. That's when I heard footsteps coming down the trail. I looked over, and it was the same guy I'd seen in the woods earlier. He had short dark hair, a scruffy beard, and wore a grayish plaid shirt with jeans. He looked like he might have been in his mid to late 30s. As he walked toward me, I noticed he was smiling, but not in a good way. I think he meant for it to look welcoming, but something about it felt forced. He must have started walking not long after I did for him to catch up so fast. He greeted me and started some basic small talk, stuff about the trail and weather. I gave short replies, hoping he'd keep walking. But then he walked right up next to me and sat down like we were friends. The friendliness felt fake, almost like he was trying too hard. It was uncomfortable. I kept eating, trying to ignore him, but he wouldn't stop talking. At one point, he made a joke about my food, calling it something like a hobo dinner, and said I needed something more nutritious. Then he pulled out a protein bar from his bag. It was already opened but hadn't been bitten. He tried to hand it to me. Obviously, I said no, but he kept insisting, saying it was good for me and that I could have it later when I got hungry. He eventually stopped pushing, but mentioned he was staying at that same campground for the night and would give it to me later. That part actually made me feel better. If he was staying here, that meant I could leave him behind. I hurried to finish eating and then told him that someone I knew was waiting for me at the next camp, so I had to keep going. He kept that same fake smile the whole time, and while he didn't say anything else, the way his expression stayed so flat and empty underneath the smile really creeped me out. I walked off and kept checking behind me to make sure he didn't come after me. I still don't know what his deal was. Maybe he was just a weird guy wanting company, but everything in my gut told me to keep going. It took me a couple more hours to get to my planned site for the night. By the time I got there, the sun was low and it was already starting to get dark. I was worn out, but something told me not to unpack just yet. I decided to wait on setting up my tent or getting too settled, just in case. Good thing I did. Not even 10 minutes later, I heard the sound of footsteps on the trail again, dry leaves crunching under someone's feet. Then, sure enough, the man showed up again, wearing that same awful grin. I know it wasn't smart, but as soon as I saw him, I felt this rush of anger. I had tried everything to get away from him. He'd said he was staying at the previous camp, so why was he here? I was tired and frustrated and ended up blurting out if he'd been following me. I made sure my tone showed I was serious. He just let out this fake laugh and said, "Yeah, I'm following you." Like it was a joke, still smiling, still standing there. Then he asked if I was hungry again after all the walking. I didn't answer. I just picked up my pack and started heading back the way I came. I didn't hear him follow right away, but I didn't trust that either. I passed the first campground again, feeling drained, but I didn't stop. I kept going another mile or so before turning off the path and slipping into the woods. I moved probably 200 to 300 feet off trail, maybe more. I quietly set up my tent, left most of my stuff in my backpack, and laid down without getting comfortable, just in case I needed to run. Despite how on edge I was so tired I actually fell asleep. But later that night, I suddenly woke up, heart pounding. I heard someone walking. The dry leaves were crunching under their shoes. The sound came from where the trail was. It had to be him, wandering around the forest at night trying to find me. The steps came closer and then eventually drifted off, fading down the trail. He didn't see me. I stayed still and waited until morning. Once the sun came up, I packed fast and hiked straight back to the car without stopping. I never saw him again. I don't know where he went after that, and honestly, I don't want to know. Looking back, I think I came way too close to something really dangerous. That guy was not just being friendly. The more I think about that open protein bar, the worse I feel. Even now, it makes my stomach turn. During the summer of 2015, when we were in our late 20s, my friend Sarah invited me to join her, her partner, and 2 of his friends on a camping weekend in the Hudson Highlands. It had been a hot, dry summer, and I already knew her partner and his friends were laid back, so anyone would have appreciated the invitation. But for me, it was more than that. I was beyond thrilled at the thought of my first ever camping experience. The reason it had taken me so long to go camping goes back to something I can barely remember now. My mom still seethes at the memory of what happened, and my dad still regrets it. When I was about 4, he and some old college buddies held a barbecue at a state park. I tagged along. While they were grilling steaks and laughing, I wandered off. Panic set in when they realized I was missing, searching frantically through the trees. They finally found me screaming at the top of my lungs, and the whole fiasco ended up with me crying all the way home. My mom never let me near woods or camps again, not even summer camp. So when Sarah suggested camping, I couldn't believe my turn had finally come. We headed up in late July, all 5 of us crammed into Sarah's beat-up old Subaru, and found a little isthmus by Greenwood Lake with a small camping loop and boat launch. Across the access road, there were some cabins, but otherwise it was just the lake, the road, and thick forest beyond, completely deserted to our city eyes. We set up camp, grilled hot dogs and beans over a fire, cracked open a few beers, and fell asleep under the stars. Early the next morning, when the guys were skipping stones, Sarah and I crossed the road to explore. Even though I was nearly 30, stepping into that forest felt like opening a door into a fantasy world. Sarah was rambling on about wanting kids, how she was ready, and he wasn't taking it seriously yet. We joked about compasses and directions. I teased her about her relationship's direction, and she rolled her eyes. Then I found myself unnaturally quiet. When she asked what was wrong, I finally managed to tell her about recurring nightmares I'd had in middle school, where I'd wander through deadwood forests to a tiny stone hut and see a creature. Its body barked, its hair flaming, smiling at me with bloody teeth before retreating. I woke up in cold sweat, nights covered in drenched sheets. It happened 2 to 3 times a week for nearly 2 years. A child therapist couldn't help. Then, sophomore year of high school, they just stopped as quickly as they'd started. Walking back through the woods that morning, I felt that old fear bubble up, but then it let go, and I started to enjoy myself again. I chalked it up to nostalgia and breathed a big sigh of relief. Later, around the campfire, Sarah joked about my déjà vu from that hike. Her partner and his friends began discussing things like past lives and remote viewing. I'd always been skeptical, but that morning's déjà vu had been intense. Like if regular déjà vu was mild lager, I tasted straight whiskey. The next day, we set out for a longer hike. I was feeling confident and thirsty. I drank so much water that I had to sneak off into the woods to pee. Once alone, I glanced back at the forest canopy, and chills crawled up my spine. Something about it screamed, familiar. I knew I shouldn't, but I followed the pull to find out what it reminded me of. A short way in, behind a rise, I found a small concrete structure with a slanted roof, exactly like the one from my nightmares. I crouched to peek inside and saw something large hidden beneath leaves and sticks. Driven by a strange mix of curiosity and dread, I pulled on what looked like an old boot, and something bounced with it, a length of bone. Not an animal bone, something else, something human. My heart pounded and I sprinted back. I burst back into camp and relayed what I saw. No mention of nightmares. Concerned, Someone finally called 911 after we showed them the structure and the remains. Police arrived within the hour and discovered a human skeleton, partially buried under leaves. They secured the site as a crime scene. We answered their questions. I'd wandered off to pee, discovered the bones, and that was it. They let us leave but said they might call later. Shaken, I asked Sarah if she'd drive me home. She agreed, rolled her eyes when the guys insisted on staying. It was their story now, they said. We drove away and it felt like a noose had been unclenched from my chest. She stayed with me that night, and as dawn broke, she asked everything I hadn't said. I hesitated at first, but finally called my mom. She was calmly furious, then made a phone call. When she called back, she said, "Sweetheart, don't freak out. But that place you went missing as a kid, it was right by Greenwood Lake. You've been there before. You just didn't remember." I reached out to the police handling the body to try and make sense of it. Their tone changed once I mentioned my childhood disappearance and the nightmare structure. They shared that the skeleton was indeed a man, found inside a half-built concrete transformer hut. They thought he was a hunter. Scraps of camouflage on him matched that theory. That explained my bark skin, flaming hair nightmare, an orange hunting vest and tree-like appearance. The blood by his mouth. He must have crawled in bleeding and died there, safe and hidden from scavengers. They confirmed death had occurred long ago, but the exact cause, gunshot, antler, or branch, wasn't shared with me. I didn't solve their case, but I got something I badly needed. Confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. I hadn't imagined my fear. I'd actually stood in a place that had nearly cost me my life as a toddler, and later unknowingly haunted me in sleep. I only hope investigators eventually find what truly happened, so that poor man can rest in that quiet forest, just as I finally have. On the 2nd of August, 1982, the Carver family left their quiet home in a small farming town called Eastbank, heading out on what was meant to be a peaceful camping trip to Clearwater Wilderness Park in British Columbia. The group included Ray and Linda Carver, both in their early 40s, along with their two girls, 14-year-old Megan and her 12-year-old sister, Abby. Traveling with them were Linda's parents, Walter and Louise Morgan, who joined for the 2-week outdoor holiday. They settled at a secluded spot near Elk Creek, close to the remains of a long-abandoned prison building. The family, all experienced with camping, brought along a small boat and a camper van filled with supplies. Plenty of food, water, fuel, and medical gear. Everything seemed set for a peaceful 2 weeks surrounded by forest and creek. What none of them could know was that this trip would end in an unthinkable nightmare. 2 weeks later, on the morning of August 17th, employees at Northern Timber Company noticed one of their workers hadn't shown up. 45-year-old Ray Carver had never missed a day of work without calling. His supervisor, knowing about Ray's recent trip to Clearwater, allowed a couple more days to pass, thinking Ray might have been delayed. But when there was still no word from him by phone, the supervisor began to worry. After several more days of unanswered calls and growing concern, Ray's boss reported the family missing to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Search teams were sent out to Elk Creek, the last known area the Carvers had visited, but there was no sign of the family or their vehicles. For weeks, the search yielded nothing but questions. That changed on September 14, 1982, when a local mushroom picker stumbled upon a burnt-out vehicle deep in the woods, not far from a remote logging trail. The trail was about 14 miles from the family's original campsite. The car looked like the same model Ray had driven to the park. Police were called to the scene right away. Inside the charred remains of the car, officers found a pile of burned bones in the back seat. The skeletal remains were carefully gathered and sent for examination. Though some still hoped they belonged to animals, forensic testing confirmed the horrifying truth. The remains belonged to the 6 missing members of the Carver family. The bodies had been doused with fuel and set on fire. As investigators dug deeper, they questioned locals around the area. One resident mentioned seeing a family camping further up the forest than where Elk Creek was. A new search was organized near the second suspected site, and it didn't take long before they found beer caps from a brand Ray was known to drink. along with 6 used .22 caliber bullet casings. Still, the Carvers' camper van and most of their belongings remained missing. Months passed with little progress. In the spring of the next year, a TV crew filmed a dramatized reenactment of the crime near the original site. The broadcast was aired across Canada in hopes of prompting new leads. Tips came pouring in, but none led anywhere. The RCMP even built a detailed replica of the Carvers' 1981 camper van, complete with the same kind of small boat strapped to the roof. They drove the mock-up from British Columbia all the way to Quebec, hoping someone might recognize it. Out of the 1,300 reports they received, none panned out. Many were false leads or simply cases of mistaken identity. Then, on October 19, 1983, over a year after the murders, 2 forestry workers hiking near Mount Griffin stumbled upon the burnt-out wreckage of the Carvers' missing camper van. It was hidden along another abandoned logging road, around 16 miles from where their bodies had been found. Investigators concluded that, like the car, the van had been set on fire using a mix of gasoline and another type of flammable liquid. There was also evidence that someone had tried to push the van into a nearby ravine, but a tangle of fallen trees had blocked the attempt. The remains of the vehicle were airlifted to a crime lab in Vancouver. Though it revealed no fresh clues, its hidden location told police something crucial. Whoever hid the van knew the area well. This detail pushed detectives to go back to re-interview people living in the area. During this renewed questioning, police came across someone who recalled a man named Mark Delane asking how to fix a bullet hole in a car door and how to re-register a vehicle. Not long after the Carvers disappeared. At the time, Delane was 25 years old and lived just a few miles from the site where the murders occurred. On November 20th, 1983, RCMP officers located Delane near the town of Pine Hill, where he was scheduled to appear in court on unrelated theft charges. They arrested him and began questioning him about the Carvers. Delane came from a law enforcement family. His father worked as a corrections officer, and his older brother served as a deputy. He'd done well in school, graduated, and completed a mechanics course. But somewhere along the line, things had gone wrong. Detectives Tom Radley and Jim Burke worked to gain Delane's trust. They assured him the arrest had nothing to do with the murders, making him comfortable enough to waive his right to a lawyer. What he didn't know was that this was a trap. Interestingly, Delane had been one of the first people interviewed after the bodies were found, and when that happened, one of the officers noticed a .22 caliber rifle hanging on his wall, the same caliber used in the crime. But at the time, they had no legal reason to seize the weapon. During the new interrogation, Delane let slip a detail that hadn't been shared with the public, that the murders had happened near Elk Creek. That comment tipped off detectives that he knew more than he should. Eventually, after hours of questioning, Delane confessed to killing all 6 members of the Carver family. He even agreed to walk officers through exactly how he had done it. He said he had waited until the adults were sitting by their fire, then shot them without warning. He claimed to have killed the girls while they slept, just to rob the family without leaving witnesses. He loaded the bodies into the car, drove it to a remote area, and burned it using 5 gallons of gas. Then he returned to the campsite, cleaned up what he could, and later burned the camper van. Before his trial began, Delane pleaded guilty to 6 counts of second-degree murder. In his statement, he said, "Asterisk, I stepped out from the trees, started shooting, and loaded the bodies into the car. The adults went in the back, the girls in the trunk. I poured the gas, it went up fast. I just stood and watched it burn." Asterisk. Though the court had no choice but to accept this version, detectives doubted they had heard the full truth. Their suspicions were soon confirmed. Detective Radley visited Delane again after sentencing and accused him of hiding something, that he had hurt the girls before killing them. That's when Delane broke and told the full, terrible truth. He confessed that he had spent several days watching the Carver family at their campsite, having become obsessed with the 2 girls. On the night of August 10th, he crept into their camp and shot the 4 adults. Megan and Abby, woken by the noise, were told by Delane that their parents had gone to help someone. He then spent the rest of the night destroying evidence and moving the girls to an old fishing cabin deep in the woods. The next day, a prison guard supervising a work outing came by the shack to introduce himself. Delane quickly hid the girls, lied to the officer, and managed to avoid suspicion. The close call didn't stop him. The following day, he moved Megan and Abby to his family's farm. 6 days later, he walked them into a field, told them to turn around under the pretense of needing to relieve himself, and shot them both in the back of the head. He placed their bodies in the trunk of the family car and set it ablaze. To verify the story, officers tracked down the prison guard who recalled the meeting exactly as Delane described. When another officer visited the old cabin, he found 2 sets of initials carved into the wood: MD for Mark Delane and MC for Megan Carver, etched inside a heart. It was a detail that made even the most seasoned officers shudder. That close, one officer later said. That close to saving them. Years later, in 1995, Delane married a woman from central Saskatchewan who had met him through prison outreach. She insisted he had changed and that his heart was good. But in 2008, after serving 24 years, Delane was denied parole because he had not completed any rehabilitation related to his offenses and was suspected of still harboring violent thoughts. In 2012, he applied again but was turned down after a petition with nearly 14,000 signatures opposed his release. He tried again in 2014 but withdrew the request just weeks before the hearing. Maybe he finally understood that no matter how much time passed, what he did was beyond forgiveness. And maybe it's best we never try to understand how a person could destroy so much for such sick reasons. In the summer of 2017, I went on a solo camping trip about an hour northeast of Fairbanks, Alaska, not far from the White Mountains area. I had already been there for 2 full days with my tent pitched and everything set up. It was a little after noon, and I had started a small fire and was sitting near it, eating a meal, when a guy suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It caught me completely off guard because I hadn't seen a single person, or even much wildlife, since I arrived. I didn't hear him walking up either, and I had no idea where he had come from. He could have stepped out from the trail or just emerged straight from the trees. Either way, it was unexpected. He looked pretty normal, had a big hiking backpack and all the standard outdoor gear. He came off polite enough. He simply asked if I knew the location of a cabin nearby. I hadn't been to the one he meant, but I had an idea of what he was referring to. There are plenty of old public-use huts along trails up here. They're tiny, basic cabins you can rest in for a night. They're usually not maintained much and are first come, first served. Over the couple of days I had been at my camp, I noticed a skinny footpath that broke off deeper into the woods. I figured it probably led to one of those cabins. I told him if there was a shelter out here, that'd be the most likely way to it. He nodded, thanked me, and walked off. I didn't think much about it afterward. Just figured it was unusual that someone else happened to be out here, too. I spent the rest of the day tending the fire and just relaxing. It was my last night before I planned to hike back out, so I just wanted to soak in the quiet and the scenery. By around 9:30 or so, the sky had dimmed, but not completely. That time of year in Alaska, the sun dips low but doesn't fully disappear. There was a soft orange light along the horizon and a lot of long shadows over the trees. That's when I noticed movement between the trees. Someone was walking in my direction. As they came into view, I realized it was the same man I had seen earlier. It threw me off. I hadn't expected to see him again. But right away he said he wasn't able to find the shelter. I said maybe it wasn't there after all, I wasn't sure. But he clarified that it wasn't the shelter he missed. It was the path I pointed him toward. He asked if I could walk him there. It didn't sit right with me. I found it strange he would come back hours later, only to say he never saw the trail. What had he been doing that whole time? I tried describing the trail again, but he seemed intent on me leading him. He mentioned he didn't bring a tent and had counted on staying in that cabin for the night. He said it in a way that made me feel kind of responsible, like if I didn't help, he'd have nowhere to go. I didn't want to go wandering around again, but I gave in. I figured it was a quick walk anyway. I slung my pack over my back and started heading that direction. I was fairly confident it was only 10 minutes or so from my site, just a short cut through the trees. As we walked, he stayed quiet. We barely said a word. Something about the energy between us had changed. It was subtle, but it felt heavier now. Sure enough, after 10 minutes, we found the trail. Exactly where I said it would be. There's just no way he missed it earlier. Even from the trailhead, you could see the shelter way off in the distance through the trees. It wasn't super clear, but it was definitely visible if you were looking. We got a little closer, and I was expecting him to say thanks or maybe head down toward it. Instead, he said this wasn't the right cabin. I didn't know what he meant. This was the only shelter in the area. We kept walking, now only a few yards from it. It looked bad, way worse than most of these shelters. Some windows were shattered, the wood looked water damaged, and moss had grown up the sides like it hadn't been used in a long time. As I stood there looking at it, I noticed it had gone quiet again. I turned around, and he was standing back about 10 feet, holding something in his hand. It was a knife. His face had gone blank. He stared at me with no emotion and said, in a flat tone, to go inside. I asked him what he was doing, but he just repeated himself, telling me to go into the cabin. My heart was pounding. I was angry for getting myself into this, but more than that, I was scared. I was out here with him, far from help, and he had a weapon. I made a split-second choice. I figured going into that shelter would be the worst decision. There was still some distance between us, so I dropped my pack and bolted into the woods. Oddly, I didn't hear him chase after me. When I looked back, he was still standing there, holding the knife, watching me. I kept running, then found a thick patch of trees and crouched down behind some brush. I stayed hidden for at least 30 minutes, hoping he would give up and leave. When I finally started creeping back, I kept my movements low and quiet. I got to the edge of the woods and looked back toward the cabin. He was gone, but so was my backpack. I had hoped dropping it would make me faster and harder to follow, but now it felt like a mistake. That pack had my phone, wallet, keys, everything. Still trying to stay calm, I made my way back toward my tent. But the moment I got close, my chest tightened. Something was off. I saw the flicker of a fire still burning at my sight. That fire should have burned out by now. I took a few cautious steps closer. My tent was still standing. It was quiet. No sound, just the soft crackling of flames. Then I saw my bag. It was sitting neatly in the middle of the camp area, like someone had placed it there on purpose. I froze. Something about this felt incredibly wrong. Why would he bring my bag back? He must have guessed I'd go back to the shelter first, not find my pack, and then return to camp to look for it. Even though every instinct in me screamed that it was a trap, I was just about to run up and grab it when he appeared again. He stepped out from behind the shadows near the fire, tossed a few more sticks onto it, then sat down like he was relaxing. I could hear him humming. He looked calm, like he was just waiting for something. That was it. I turned right around, found the main trail, and hiked for hours through the forest until I finally made it back to the road. It took a while to flag down a driver, but eventually someone stopped and helped me. I got in touch with the authorities after that. The next morning, officers and park rangers went back into the area with me, but everything was gone. My camp, my things, all of it. Even the stones from my fire pit had been scattered into the woods. It was like the whole campsite had never existed. The rangers told me the cabin out there wasn't maintained anymore. They'd stopped checking on it years ago. It was technically still there, but off their active registry. That night stuck with me for a long time. I didn't go hiking or camping alone for nearly a year after. I've slowly started doing solo trips again, but that memory never leaves me. I still think about how close I came to not making it out. If I'd gone into that shelter or tried to grab my bag, things could have ended very differently. I usually head into the woods just outside the edge of my town several times a year, at least 4 or 5. That weekend, I had this sudden need to get away for a bit and spend time on my own. I packed up my bag in a rush and drove out to my favorite spot. Honestly, I don't even know if it was an official trail that showed up on any maps. I never saw anyone else walking it or camping out there, so I have no idea if it was known by many. I left my car on the roadside near the trees, grabbed my backpack, and hiked about 2 hours all the way in. This area of the forest wasn't hilly or steep. It was mostly flat with a thick cover of trees all around. It was good for a quick 1 or 2 night trip, but not the kind of place you'd want to stay much longer. Could get boring pretty fast. The campsite didn't have much going on. There were still a few hours left until sunset, so I took my time setting things up and got a fire started. I sat there, eating a handful of trail mix, listening to the fire crackle and birds chirp. As the sun got lower, I tossed a few more branches into the fire. I always found it strange how the woods go from full of sound and life to being totally quiet as soon as the sun goes down. I sat and listened to the stillness for maybe 25 minutes after dark when a weird noise broke the silence. It was music, faint and far off, but it was definitely music, some really old classical tune. It sounded almost like it was coming from an old record player. I got up and turned toward the sound. Maybe there was someone else camping nearby. Maybe a group was out there playing music, just really loud for some reason. I stayed put, just listening. It went on for at least 30 minutes. What made it feel strange and honestly kind of spooky was that the song never switched. It was the same old piece repeating over and over, filling up the quiet woods with this eerie tune. Normally, I don't care if other campers are around or even partying or being loud. But this didn't feel normal, felt wrong. I didn't like it. After about half an hour, I decided to walk in the direction of the sound just to check it out. I didn't want to spy on anybody, just make sure nothing weird was going on so I'd feel okay falling asleep. I took my flashlight and started walking toward the music. It felt like I was going a long way, which made it even weirder that I could hear it from my campsite in the first place. As I got closer, the music got louder and things started to feel really off. My skin was crawling, and I could feel my heartbeat picking up. That's when it hit me. I'd only brought my flashlight. I didn't think to grab my pocket knife or pepper spray. I should have. Eventually, it sounded like I was just 30 or 40 feet away, but I didn't see anything. No fire, no lanterns, no sign of any camp. Then I spotted it. A big speaker sitting halfway hidden behind a tree. Nothing else was there. I scanned all around with my flashlight. No tent, no gear, no people. I walked over to the speaker. It looked old, like something from the early 2000s. Just a big box with faded buttons and a tiny screen. I found the power button and shut it off. Suddenly, it was dead quiet. The change was chilling. Who would leave this out here like this? It felt like someone was trying to bait someone. But I tried to think of normal reasons. Maybe another camper accidentally left it behind, or, I don't know. Nothing really added up. Still, I didn't want to believe it was something darker. I didn't stick around any longer than I had to. I made my way back to my camp fast, feeling a bit calmer once I saw the fire again and got back to what felt like a safer space. But as the minutes passed, I couldn't shake the strange feeling, like something wasn't right. I couldn't say what exactly, but it was creeping in stronger by the second. That's when I remembered my knife and pepper spray. I figured if I kept them close, I'd feel better. But that's when I noticed something was wrong. Things were missing. My matches, the utensils I brought to cook with, and both my knife and pepper spray were just gone. My whole body froze. Someone had been here. I didn't take time to think. I began packing whatever was left in a rush. And that's when it happened. The music started playing again, out in the dark. But this time it was closer. Not out where I found the speaker before, but somewhere nearby. Much closer. I grabbed my bag and bolted down the trail. As I got further away, the music started to fade out. I began to feel a little more at ease. Still rattled, but at least I knew whoever was out there was back where that speaker had been. That meant I was moving away from them. I kept walking fast for about 15 minutes. The forest was quiet again. No more music, nothing but trees all around me. That's when I saw something up ahead on the trail. It was my missing stuff. The knife, pepper spray, utensils, everything that had vanished, was laid out neatly in the middle of the path. Lined up perfectly. Something felt wrong. Before I could pick any of it up, I heard fast footsteps behind me. Quick, heavy steps coming straight for me. I spun around with my light, but all I saw was darkness. I took off running. I didn't stop for what felt like 10 solid minutes. Then I slowed down to a fast walk for the rest of the way. I didn't stop again until I made it out of those woods and back to the road. I still don't know what exactly happened out there that night. It felt like I barely got away from someone truly messed up. Like they were playing a game. Like I was the target. I haven't gone back to that forest since, and I never will.